Is it 10 o'clock? It's 10 o'clock. Hello, and welcome to Tuesday. And our reading from Low Magic. It's all in your head. You just have no idea how big your head is. We are on part two of the chapter 13, which is the exorcism of Our Lady of Sorrows. Because this deals with the formula, at least, of Goetic evocation, I have to remind you that tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, my time, I'm doing a Zoom workshop on Goetic magic, Solomonic magic, and evocation. And somewhere on my page here, if you scroll down a little bit, you'll probably see the link to it. So if this chapter excites your curiosity at all, I think you'll also enjoy tomorrow night's workshop. So plug over. Here's part two, the preparation. And I've got a little epigram up at the top, which is a quote from one of my favorite movies that I never need to see again, The Exorcist. Father Damien Carras says, I think it might be helpful if I gave you some background on the different personalities Regan has manifested. So far, I'd say there seem to be three. And then the exorcist, Father Marin, interrupts him and says, there is only one. It has been my observation, always in hindsight, that the real magic of a magical operation is accomplished in the preparation process rather than the execution of the ceremony itself. The magic ritual is merely the seal that grounds the current of the magician's will and completes the circuitry on all planes. Like Minerva leaping from the cloven skull of Zeus, my plan for the exorcism was fully formed before I stepped out of the shower. It crystallized in my brain in the timeless moment between the shampoo and rinse, and was triggered by a simple vision, a childhood memory of old Mr. Jacobs, the janitor at my old elementary school, sweeping the floor of the gymnasium. And I've got a creepy footnote here. I went to Highland Park Elementary School in Columbus, Nebraska. And I remember Mr. Jacobs having long, curved fingernails as thick as an eagle's talons. They were really creepy. But anyway, his technique was simple, methodical, and tidy. He would first sweep all the dirt and debris from every corner of the gym floor and concentrate the mess into one neat pile in the center of the floor. Then, with a final flourish of the broom, he dispatched the nasty pile into his dustbin. I would do the same. I would sweep the totality of the phenomena, the entire conglomerate of forces and energies that were tormenting the school and its inhabitants, into one pile. And then I would treat the pile as a single entity. I would focus and create one master devil that embodied all the lesser demons that severally work their specific acts of mischief and terror, one spirit that I could evoke into a Solomonic triangle of art. Once I had the nasty critter trapped, I would have a proper talk with it, banish it, curse it, and if necessary, annihilate it by using the tried and true techniques of the art of Solomonic magic. You might think it somewhat presumptuous of me. After all, where does DuQuette get off creating demons? Aren't there already enough evil spirits running around the cosmos? I confess these questions didn't even occur to me, because for all intents and purposes, the staff, faculty, and students of Our Lady of Sorrows had already created the devilish spirit. They just didn't know its name. And for the moment, neither did I. What's in a name? It's a universal axiom promulgated by the magical traditions of nearly every age and culture that discovering the name of a spiritual entity gives the magician power over it. Recall the story of Rumpelstiltskin. In traditional Solomonic magic or Goetia, the names of the 72 spirits are provided in the text. The book also contains the images of each spirit's sigil or seal. The seal is a very important ingredient in the recipe of evocation. Indeed, it's upon the seal in the triangle that the spirit appears before the magician. 2 copies of the sigil are used in the classic ceremony, one drawn on a medallion that is worn around the magician's neck. The other is drawn on parchment and placed within the triangle where the spirit will appear. The magician and the spirit are thus linked by the 2 sigils. The spirit is drawn to its own sigil and then becomes trapped in the triangle while the magician stands in relative safety of the circle. I'll talk more about that in a moment. My first task would be to discover the spirit's name, and then use the letters of its name to generate the image of its sigil, which I would use in the operation. Other magicians, I'm sure, will have their own ideas how best this is done. On this occasion, I chose to use the pendulum. Over the years, I've gained some proficiency applying this marvelous tool in magical and divinatory operations. My pendulum is a small brass plum that was given to me many years ago by my dear friend Donald Weiser. It's attached to a string about 18 inches in length. I use it in various ways, but for this task I would use it to determine a series of yes-no questions. A clockwise rotation indicating yes, and a counterclockwise rotation indicating no. I went to the garage and I got down the family Scrabble game. I opened it up and emptied the lettered tiles on the living room coffee table. I turned the tiles face down on the table and swirled them around for a moment. Then I tied the string of my pendulum to the tip of my magic wand and began the process of selecting letters that spelled the name of the demon. It must have been quite a scene. A large, and in those days a very large, man in a black robe sitting on the couch and dangling his wand and pendulum like a tiny fishing pole over each scrabbled tile while asking out loud, to seemingly no one in particular, "Is this a letter in the name of the demon of Our Lady of Sorrows?" About 10 minutes later, the pendulum had chosen only 3 tiles, which I set aside, still face down, while I put the rest back in the box. Then, one by one, the pendulum determined the order of the 3 letters in the spirit's name. I then turned the tiles over, and voila! The name was revealed. It was a funny-looking name, with no vowels. SLG. Would that be pronounced slug, slog, slig, slug, slag, sludge? I had to admit slug sounded like a pretty proper and nasty name for a demon. If these were Hebrew letters, they would probably be Samach, Lamed, and Gimel. And as we know, each Hebrew letter also represents a number. In this case, Samach would be 60, Lamed 30, and Gimel 3. Together, they totaled 93. Now, 93 is a pretty important number for many modern Hermetic Kabbalists who, like me, subscribe to the magical doctrines of Thelema. And the watchwords, do what thou wilt, shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. If you've ever corresponded with a Thelemite, you've probably noticed that we begin our letters and email with the former phrase and close with the latter. The words will and love in Greek are thelema and agape, or agape, or agape. And each enumerate to 93. In informal communications and in social gatherings, Thelemite magicians often abbreviate these phrases to their numerical essence and simply greet each other with a friendly 93. This amused me at first, as if the demon were being playful. My amusement soon cooled as it occurred to me that the S in this spirit's name could also be treated as the Hebrew letter Shin, whose number is 300. And in that case, the name Shin Lamed Gimel would add to 333. Now, I realize not everyone reading this book is a magician or a Hermetic Kabbalist, and therefore should not be expected to appreciate what all the fuss is concerning these numbers. But for many modern magicians, no number carries more terrifying implications than does 333. It is the number of the archdevil Corone Zone, the dweller in that horrible, pathless anti-region of the Tree of Life known as the Abyss. Every magician, as he or she ascends the evolutionary ladder of consciousness, is sooner or later obliged to pass through the looking glass of this abyss. And it's the final barrier preventing the true essence of the magician's consciousness from identifying completely with that of the divine. The ego cannot make it through the abyss. Indeed, nothing that the magician has heretofore considered self can pass through that awful non-place. If the crossing is successful, what emerges on the other side is the equivalent of a Buddha, a master of the temple, a level of consciousness represented by the third Sephirah, Bina, on the Tree of Life. If unsuccessful, the magician, still clutching to and identifying with the false self of ego, falls into the abyss and is lost in the perpetual madness of a false Sephirah. Da'ath, closed off and separated from both the divine influence from above and the merciful distractions of mundane consciousness from below. Now, before any of us gets too carried away here, I want to make it perfectly clear that I presently dwell conspicuously low on the Tree of Life's initiatory ladder of consciousness. I do not believe that I was on that day, nor am I now poised on the precipice of that great initiatory crisis. But at the time I did interpret the numbers 93 and 333 to be an unmistakable personal two-part message for me from the demon, which I will vulgarly and succinctly boil down to something like this. 93. Hi, Lon. I've got your number, Mr. Hotshot Thelemic Magician. And 333. Don't mess with me. I'm one bad-ass demon. I'm not going to attempt to further explain the magical nuances implied by the manifestation of these numbers as they relate to the demon's name and my own magical career, nor do I wish to overstate or overdramatize the significance of either number 93 or 333 in this particular context. It's enough that you understand that for me, this bit of Kabbalistic information added a new and disturbing personal spiritual dimension to this operation, one that informed me that in no uncertain terms that the struggle in which I was about to engage was inextricably linked to unseen and unrecognized issues relating to my own initiatory career. Indeed, it was my battle, my crisis, my initiation. Sister Martha didn't know it, but in asking me to exorcise Our Lady of Sorrows, she also retained me to call forth and exorcise a demon from myself. And when you think about it, how could it be otherwise? As for the true and proper name of the demon, I decided to incorporate both spellings and call it SLG, SHLG. And I pronounced it slug slug. Very Lovecraftian, I thought. Slug slug, slug slug. Don't say it 3 times. I created a simple slug slug sigil by using a the large lettered rose from the center of the Hermetic Rose Cross. And there's how you do it. Oh, there's is. And see how I drew the sigil off the rose? Okay. So eventually the sigil ended up looking like that. And that when it's in a square, I also drew it on one of those yellow sticky pad things, and I'll explain why I did that in a minute. Now I knew the spirit's name, I had its sigil. I used a magic marker to draw the sigil on the front of a circular copper medallion. The medallion was attached to a chain. I would wear it around my neck and show it to Slug Slug immediately upon its appearance in the triangle, thus binding it to me for the duration of the ceremony. Etched on the reverse side of the medallion is an image of the pentagram of Solomon. Right there. It's the symbol of the microcosm and the magician's mastery of himself or herself and the world of the elements. It is the second image the magician displays to the spirit on its appearance, sort of like a police officer showing his or her badge to the bad guy. It's an also handy thing to flash if the spirit becomes obstinate or worse. I drew another version of the sigil within the triangle on the top sheet of a new pad of yellow 3x3 post-it notes. I'll soon explain why I used a post-it note for this purpose. For now, please be satisfied with knowing that I would place this pad in the triangle during the ceremony of evocation, and it would later play a prominent role in the exorcism itself. Now I had everything I needed to evoke the demon Slug Slug. Mark was due to pick me up in less than 2 hours. I needed to work fast. This would not be a straightforward evocation, whereby I simply evoked the spirit, introduced myself, and gave it its assignment, and then order it to run along like a good fellow and do its duty. On this occasion, I was to do something I had never done before, even in my past capacity as an exorcist. This time, I would formally conjure the spirit at one location, my home. Then, without dismissing it from the triangle, and without me stepping out of the protective precincts of my circle, I would transport my activated temple, including myself inside the circle and the demon inside the triangle, to another location, Our Lady of Sorrows High School. And there, in the middle of the night, I would resume the operation and proceed with the exorcism. I will now describe how it was done. And that's where we'll pick up tomorrow on part 3 of this chapter. And I hope you're enjoying it so far. And actually, I hope you're finding it helpful if you're interested in this kind of magic. And until then, have a very, very good Tuesday. And continue, be good to yourself. I really mean it, okay? Who else? You can't be good to anybody else unless you're good to yourself. And be good to each other. So, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. 93.